Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 43 and be with me in the book of Hebrews. Today's title is Considered Sight Before Certain Sight. New definition of faith. Faith is considered sight before certain sight. So this is a view of God, and we're going to ask, is God faithful, and is God worthy, is the reproach of being in God's family worthy of being in God's family? And Moses is going to answer that question. Yes, he's the one we're going to get to at the end. Okay, so yesterday we went from that prayer can time travel into the future, and we find that Isaac and Jacob both considered that the blessings of God could time travel and span over generations and over time. So they considered God able to sort of bless in a time travel-y sort of way. So perhaps God is not finished with his work here on the earth. Perhaps he's not finished with generations. And the question is, can this generation have an influence and an impact on generations to come? And yesterday we actually prayed for that. We prayed for our descendants, both physical and spiritual descendants. And Isaac invoked the blessings on Jacob and Esau. And then Jacob does the same thing today as he blesses his grandsons. So there's this chain of heritage. So we're not the first link in the chain. And faith has been pleasing to God for a long time. And people have been challenged to draw near to God over the generations. So we should be encouraged by their care and concern for the future generations. And the best way that we can influence our future generations is not by leaving them stuff, by leaving them a Savior, not by leaving them land, by leaving them the Lord, not by leaving them your name, but by leaving them his name. All right, read with me. This is from Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to read verses 21 through 28. It's going to start with Jacob, but we're going to get to Moses. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, 300 years later or so, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who was invisible. So we start with Joseph here, or let's just start with Joseph in verse 22. And back in Genesis chapter 50, he says, as he's on the way out, before he dies, he said, God will visit you, his nation of Israel, who were living in Egypt at the time, and will bring you out of Egypt. And he actually told them to take his bones with them when they left. So Joseph has this vision as he blesses them and say, look, you're a group of 100 people or so, less than 100 people, and you're going to grow to a group of 3 million, and eventually God is going to take you out of Egypt. So this is about 300 years later, between verses 22 and 23, the best scholars can figure out, because this nation grows from 100 people to like about 3 million people. And it's the era that there's so many Israelites that the Egyptians are murdering infants. They're throwing them in the Nile. They're exposing them to the elements. And then we find that God makes this beautiful baby and gives them brave parents who aren't afraid of the edict. So Moses' parents make the Hall of Fame of Faith. And they put Moses, let him age to 3 months, very likely after his circumcision. They put him in a basket. So everybody knew that he was a Hebrew. Just look in his diaper. Pharaoh's daughter finds him. She finds a wet nurse to take care of this beautiful baby. Of course, that's his actual mother. Egypt was full of Israeli wet nurses because they were killing all their babies, and actually gives her wages for mothering Moses. Well, he's beautiful enough that this Egyptian Pharaoh's daughter has pity on him. So The Lord was moving the people around Moses to help him to be ready. And he raised Pharaoh's daughter, but as he grew up, when he finally reached the age of accountability, he refused to be called a son of Egypt. So he chose to be mistreated with the people of God. Are you in a people? That's a good question for you today. Do you have a group of people that you say, hey, these are my people and I'm going to belong to them? Why? Well, one thing is you're going to need a people because you're going to get mistreated politically or relationally or culturally. So Moses considered the reproach of Christ and the reproach of the Jews very similar to this reproach of Jesus. He considered it a good thing, a valuable thing, a precious thing. He considered it worthy. So did in Acts chapter 5, the apostles get beaten and put in prison, and they were thrilled. They were finally found worthy. So we may get the reproach for the way that we consider God. It happened before Jesus, happened to Moses, happened to Jesus himself, and then it happens after Jesus. He endured as seeing him who was invisible. So it's trusting in the person of God, seeing God in a certain way before we get the actual vision. So concluding points. Number one, humility. We're not the first link in this chain. God has been at work and will be at work. Secondly is perspective. Let's have prayer and encouragement, and let's receive this prophecy that shoots down the corridor of time. Let's respond in faith like Moses' parents and Moses himself, and let's trust in the person of God before we see the promises of God fully having effect. Let's get in the people of God. Let's be ready for reproach. It'll be a joyful day when you get reproach. Be in the people of God so you can endure the reproach. So let's see God in a certain way, and let's consider him before we see certain sight. So it is considered sight today before certain sight. That is the eyes of faith, before the eyes of the events are clear. Abraham considered God able to raise. Sarah considered him faithful. And now we see that Moses considered that the reproach was worth it. So let's have considered sight, the way we consider God, the way we have faith, the way we see God, before we have certain sight. Thanks for listening.